The Serpent's Compass. Chapter 1: Ashes in the Sand. The desert didn't whisper secrets. It buried them. Darek Amun crouched low beside the crumbled fire pit, his fingers sifting through the ashes. A single charred fragment of papyrus curled in the breeze, nearly lost before he caught it and pinned it with a brass stylus. He didn't breathe. Not until he saw what had survived the fire. A symbol. Half melted, nearly gone, but unmistakable, a coiled serpent with a single eye open wide, the sigil of Wadjet. Darek let out a slow exhale. "You tried to burn it," he muttered, brushing sand from his coat, but someone was in a hurry. The sun was rising fast over the cliffs of Purbastet, turning stone to firelight. The smuggler camp had been abandoned, sloppily. Casks left half buried. Footprints heading north in panicked zigzags. And now this, a scroll fragment marked with a symbol every temple archive had redacted. The Compass of Wadjet. Not a myth. Not anymore. He tucked the fragment into a leather folder and stood, brushing off his travel robes. The blue lotus pendant around his neck caught the light, his father's old charm, worn smooth by time and sweat. He gave it a quick tap, a private ritual, and turned to the rusted column that jutted from the sand nearby. "You're pointing somewhere," he said to it. "The trick is whether it's a warning or a dare." Behind him, a voice cut through the wind. "Still talking to statues?" Darek turned, grinning. Rafi stood with one hand on his hip and a half-broken compass in the other. "The trail ends here." Again. "No," Darek said, lifting the charred scroll fragment. "It starts here." Rafi frowned. "You sure that's not just a burned tax receipt?" "Positive. This isn't temple script. It's older. Expedition era, 5th dynasty at the latest." He held up the mark of Wadjet. Even faded, it seemed to hum with warning. "I think I just found the next piece." They made camp inside the mouth of a dried-out ravine that night. Darek hunched over his notes while Rafi tuned the short-range transmitter. "What exactly does this compass do?" Rafi finally asked, the fire crackling between them. Darek didn't look up. "They say it finds lost tombs. Not with magnets. Not with maps. It senses where divine magic lingers. Not spells. Not curses. Just echoes. Imprints. Places that were never meant to be found." Rafi looked unconvinced. "And you believe that?" "No," Darek looked up, eyes gleaming. "But the Brotherhood does. And they've been burning every scrap of evidence that it ever existed. Which means they're scared of it." He tossed the last of the coffee grounds into the fire. "And scared men make mistakes." Somewhere beyond the hills, the wind shifted. And something in the sand moved that shouldn't have. Chapter 2: The Brotherhood's Trail. The sun had barely cracked the horizon when Darek Amun was already on the move, boots crunching over hard-packed sand as he followed a set of vanishing footprints beneath a tangle of rock and shadow. The fragment he'd found last night was tucked into a hidden pocket close to his chest. He hadn't told Rafi everything, not yet. Some truths had to be unfolded carefully, like a pressure plate waiting to snap. He crouched beside a slab of black basalt, the kind not native to this region. It had been hauled here, deliberately placed, part of an old outpost long swallowed by the desert. Chisel marks ran along its edge, and just beneath the surface dust, a faint inscription, "The Eye Watches Below." Darek's jaw tightened. The Brotherhood had been here. He rose quickly, eyes narrowing toward a scatter of rocks forming a broken crescent ahead. A hidden marker, if you knew what to look for. And Darek did. The fire had died down to embers. Rafi snored softly, face half covered by a worn keffiyeh. But Darek was still wide awake, hunched over his sketchpad. He hadn't been able to shake the memory of the scroll's symbol, not just what it meant, but how it felt. Familiar. Too familiar. He pulled a folded slip of parchment from his satchel, one he hadn't touched in over a year. His father's last message. Scrawled in haste, written in the margins of a stolen burial plan. Among the notations was a small, almost careless mark, the coiled Serpent of Wadjet. They hid it where memory won't go, it read. Darek hadn't understood it then. He wasn't sure he did now. But a pattern was forming. And the Brotherhood, whatever they were guarding, wasn't doing it for the gods. They were doing it for themselves. A thin trail of blood marred the sand near the first rock, only a few drops, darkened by time, leading toward a collapsed tent buried by drift. Darek knelt, pulling aside the canvas flap. Inside lay a man. Or what was left of one. The robe bore the familiar insignia, embroidered in deep crimson, the veiled eye surrounded by 7 rays. The Brotherhood's mark. His face was badly weathered, lips cracked, but there was no sign of a wound. No blade. No blood beneath him. Only one thing stood out. His hands were clenched tight around something. Darek pried them open carefully. A bronze amulet, serpentine in shape, its head twisted back on itself, biting its own tail. Not a symbol of eternity. A lock. He pocketed the amulet and stepped back, heart thudding. The air was thicker here, charged with something old. Not divine. Not magical. But ancient in a way that pressed on the ribs. As he stood, something cracked beneath his boot. He looked down, a tile. A single shard of greenish ceramic, inscribed with the old desert tongue. Vault sealed. Remembrance forbidden. Behind him, someone coughed. Darek whirled around, blade half-drawn. It was Rafi. "You were right," he said breathlessly. "We're not the only ones on the trail." "How do you know?" Rafi nodded toward the far ridge, where a column of dust rose faintly in the early light. A caravan. Unmarked. Moving fast. Too fast for traders. Brotherhood? Darek asked. Or worse. Mercs. Darek glanced back at the corpse, then to the ridge, calculating. "They're not here for the compass," he said slowly. "They're here to keep us from finding it." He pulled out the bronze amulet, held it up to the sun. In its center, a groove matched perfectly with the shape of the pendant he wore. Something clicked in his mind. This isn't just a lock," he murmured. "It's a coordinate." Rafi looked puzzled. "To what?" Darek grinned. "To where memory isn't supposed to go." And without another word, he turned back toward camp, eyes already scanning the stars burned into his mental map. He had a direction now. But the Brotherhood was already ahead of them. And if they reached the vault first, the truth behind the Compass of Wadjet might never be seen again. Chapter 3, The Vault of Teeth. The cliffs rose like fangs from the sand, jagged limestone formations shaped by wind and time into cruel, snarling silhouettes. Locals called this stretch Jebel al-Ashira, the Mountain of Whispers. But Darek Amun had found an older name scrawled in a forbidden text tucked deep within the Temple of Archives. The Vault of Teeth. He now knew why. "It's not a metaphor," he muttered, staring up at the colossal archway carved into the cliff face. Rows of obsidian shards were embedded in the rock, glinting like enamel in the morning sun. Some had fallen, shattered at the base. Others stood intact, polished smooth by wind, or hands. Rafi caught up, panting. "This place isn't on any chart. And I checked twice." "Because someone made sure it wouldn't be," Darek replied, stepping carefully between the teeth-like stones. "Help me find a breach point. There's an entry chamber hidden somewhere beneath the left flank." Look for a false wall, pressure plate, anything that screams, touch me and regret it. Layla arrived a moment later, trailing with her satchel of glyph rubbings and her ever-growing list of reasons why this was a terrible idea. She added a fresh one. You realize the Brotherhood's caravan is only a few hours behind us? Then we're exactly where we should be, Darek said. It wasn't a wall. It was a mouth. The false panel clicked under Rafi's heel, revealing a narrow crevice lined with broken tiles. Dust moaned as ancient air escaped from the gap. The passage descended at a steep angle, vanishing into darkness that no torch could pierce. Darek lit his lantern anyway, flame trembling in the stale draft. Stay close. If you hear grinding stone, duck first and ask questions later. The corridor narrowed, forcing them to move single file. Reliefs lined the walls, serpents coiled around crowned figures, blindfolded scribes offering bowls of ink, and one particular image that stopped Layla cold. Darek, look. The carving showed a man, Lotus pendant visible at his chest, kneeling before a cracked mirror. Inside the mirror, his reflection wore a serpent mask. It's you, she whispered. No, Darek said quietly. It's someone who made the same mistake I'm about to. The chamber opened suddenly, a yawning cavern beneath the mountain. At its center rose a dais of black stone, shaped like a compass, but split, fractured, with jagged points leading not outward, but in. Around the dais stood 7 statues. Hooded. Each held a long rod crowned with different symbols: fire, sand, silence, memory, shadow, time, and blood. And etched into the floor, 7 voices must be silenced. One truth must be spoken. Rafi's voice was dry. So, which of those rods doesn't kill us? Darek stepped forward, eyeing the rods with a frown. None of them, he said. But only one asks. He reached for the rod of memory, and the chamber responded. The vault trembled. The statues turned, slowly, stone grinding against stone. From their mouths, a strange hum began, a language lost to time. Then the center of the compass lit up, and the shards pointed to a direction none of them had charted before. Layla held up the bronze amulet. Darek, the groove, it fits right here. He took the amulet and inserted it into the center of the compass. A low, mechanical click echoed through the vault. Then the floor began to sink. Not collapse, descend. They were on a hidden platform. Below them, the chamber peeled open like the inside of a clock. And there, in the depths, a map. Etched in gold, jade, and ash. A map that led into the serpent's spine, the forbidden region of lost tombs. And etched across its center in furious strokes was one final message. The compass does not point to the tomb. It unlocks it. Chapter 4, The Tomb That Wasn't Meant to Open. The platform shuddered as it reached the bottom, locking into place with a dull clang that echoed like a final decision. Dust rained from the ceiling above, and the temperature dropped, not cold, exactly, but sharp, like the air had been cut and stitched back together wrong. Darek Amun stepped off first, lantern high, boots crunching on a floor tiled in concentric rings. The room around them was vast, circular, its domed ceiling sloping upward like the inside of a tomb, but one built in reverse. No sarcophagus. No offerings. No wall reliefs to glorify the dead. Only absence. Deliberate absence. This isn't a tomb, Layla whispered, clutching her satchel like a shield. It's a vault. Or worse, a trap. Rafi moved to the far wall, running his fingers over a smooth copper panel set into the stone. Looks sealed. No hinges. No marks. Look closer, Darek said. There, faint scoring on the copper. Like something burned its way out. Rafi stepped back quickly. That's comforting. Darek turned to the map they'd uncovered above, the compass's final revelation. The golden etchings had matched a region known only in oral histories, the Serpent spine, a scar-like canyon rumored to have swallowed entire cults. According to the Brotherhood's own redacted texts, a powerful pharaoh, he who was never named, ordered the tomb built here and then ordered every worker who touched its foundation entombed with it. Alive. Why? No one said. No one dared. Until now. A single pedestal rose from the floor. No inscriptions. No markings. Only a flat, circular surface and a small, indented groove in its center, just wide enough for the bronze amulet. Darek looked to Rafi and Layla. We open this, we're in. No turning back. Rafi gave a dry laugh. We were past that the moment you picked up that burnt scroll in Perbastet. Layla simply nodded. Do it. Darek placed the amulet into the groove. It sank with a hiss, and something behind the walls let out a sound like an exhale held for 1,000 years. The copper panel lit from within, pale green at first, then bright white. And it began to open. Not slide. Not lift. Unfold. Layer after layer peeled outward like petals made of metal and bone, until finally. They saw it. Not a tomb. A chamber of restraint. Chains draped from the ceiling, but there was no body, no sarcophagus. Only a raised platform in the center with 7 carved depressions, and a single serpent-headed helm resting in the middle. The Compass of Wadjet. Darek stepped forward slowly, eyes fixed on it. But something was wrong. The moment his foot touched the platform, a pulse ran through the floor. The serpent helm lifted itself upright, like a cobra ready to strike. A voice, not spoken, not heard, but imposed, filled their minds. You have reached the edge of the forgotten. Name the blood that brought you. Layla gasped and stumbled back. That's a memory echo. But stronger. Darek didn't answer the voice. He stared at the helm, feeling the pressure rise in his chest like something old and buried was waking up in him. Then, without knowing why, he whispered, I am Ammonius. Son of the Builder. Bearer of the Lotus. Silence. Then a sharp sound, metal unlocking from stone. The chains above them began to shift. The serpent helm collapsed back into stillness. And on the wall behind the platform, a new passage opened, one that hadn't been marked, one that had no stairs, no floor. Only a plunge into darkness lit faintly by shimmering green veins in the stone. Rafi swallowed. We really doing this? Darek smiled without humor. The tomb wasn't meant to open, so let's see what they were so afraid of. Chapter 5, The Bloodstone Descent. The passage yawned open like a throat carved into the mountain's heart, its walls veined with glowing green crystal, humming with a low, unnerving vibration. Not quite mechanical. Not magical. More like something alive was waiting below, breathing just slow enough to pretend it wasn't there. Darek Ammonius knelt at the threshold, brushing the floor with gloved fingers. The slope wasn't natural. Too smooth. Too deliberate. The descent was sharp, and the grooves worn into the sides told a story. People had come down here before. But they hadn't come back up. Rafi stared into the void. That's not a staircase. That's a slide into the underworld. Darek held up a rope coil. Then let's not fall. We're not amateurs. He tied off a line around a stone outcrop at the chamber's edge, then fed it into the sloping passage. It disappeared into blackness after 20 meters. Secure and steady, Darek said. If it starts shaking or glowing, don't let go. Rafi raised a brow. Those are our instructions now. Layla rolled her eyes and clipped into the line. Better than, scream less when you see something horrific. One by one, they descended into the shaft, feet against the wall, shoulders brushing the greenlit stone. As they went deeper, the air grew colder, heavier. The pressure felt unnatural. Like they were being watched by something that remembered what eyes were. Their boots hit solid ground at last, the tunnel widening into a low-ceilinged chamber lit by that same eerie green glow, this time from thin rivulets running through the stone like veins. But here, the glow was broken by something else. Stains. Dark. Rusty. Still faintly sticky in places. Blood, Rafi said softly. Old, but not ancient. Someone came after the Brotherhood, Darek muttered, examining the patterns. Or worse, with them. At the far end of the chamber stood an altar. Not a sacrificial slab, a table. A place for study. Instruments lay scattered across it, calipers, chisels, ink brushes, a cracked lens of obsidian glass. And beside them, a journal. Scorched on one edge. Darek opened it carefully, flipping past the burnt pages until he found entries still intact. Field Notes, Order of the Veiled Eye. Entry 19. We followed the resonance deeper into the vault. The artifact pulses not with power, but with refusal. It remembers what we are. It rejected Kent after blood contact. 3 of the 7 lost their minds before reaching the Echo Gate. 1 walked into the vein wall and did not return. He turned the page. Entry 20. We cannot remove it. It is not an object. It is a will buried in copper. The compass is not a map, it is a verdict. And we have been judged. Rafi looked over his shoulder. So that's encouraging. Darek closed the journal. They were trying to claim something that was never meant to be taken. The Compass of Wadjet isn't a tool. It's a key to a memory we weren't supposed to unlock. Layla approached the altar's edge. Then why does it need someone like you to find it? Darek looked at the lotus pendant at his neck, rubbed smooth by time and grief. Because I'm part of the memory. Past the blood-stained chamber stood another wall, this one pulsing slowly, like it had a pulse. Cracks in the stone formed circular patterns, like an iris. And at its center, a small depression, serpent-shaped. Darek pulled out the bronze amulet. You sure? Rafi asked. No, Darek said honestly. But it called me. He pressed the amulet into the socket. The wall rippled. Then shrank, folding inward like retreating water, revealing the next descent, a wide, spiraling ramp made from stone shot through with mirror-like obsidian. As they stepped through, Darek caught a glimpse of his reflection on the wall. Except it wasn't him. It wore the serpent mask. And it was smiling. He blinked, and the image vanished. Layla clutched his sleeve. Did you see it? Darek nodded. We're not descending into a tomb, he said. We're walking into a memory so old, it had to be buried in blood just to be forgotten. Chapter 6, The Eyes That Never Closed. The spiral ramp dropped into silence, not the natural kind, but the suffocating, engineered quiet of a place built to erase sound. Every footstep felt like an intrusion. Every breath, too loud. Darek Amun led the descent, lantern in one hand, the serpent pendant brushing against his chest with each cautious step. The walls here were mirror-like, not just from obsidian but from something polished into impossible smoothness. Light didn't reflect so much as it twisted, and in it, their reflections warped subtly, too tall, slightly turned, eyes too bright or mouths moving half a second behind. Layla kept close, one hand on the wall for balance, the other clutching a strip of papyrus she'd been scribbling notes on. These aren't just reflections, she whispered. They're echoes. Darek glanced sideways at one distorted image of himself. The reflection blinked before he did. No, he said. They're watchers. The ramp widened into an antechamber where the floor gave way to a smooth black platform floating above a chasm. On either side, dozens, no, hundreds, of sculpted eyes jutted from the walls, carved in obsidian, quartz, hematite. Each one different. Each one pointed directly at the center. The platform. Rafi stopped short. Tell me those are decorative. Darek didn't answer. He stepped forward instead. As his boots touched the platform, the air changed, sharpened. The eyes hummed, not aloud, but in his bones. The moment Layla and Rafi followed, the entrance behind them sealed shut with a sound like sand grinding through bone. The hum deepened into a rhythmic pulse. Something's happening, Layla said. We triggered a recognition mechanism. I think the chamber's reacting to your presence, Darek. No, he said, looking around. Not to me. To the pendant. He held up the blue lotus hanging from his neck. For the first time, it pulsed faintly with the same greenish glow as the walls. Then, a voice. Not words. Not sound. Image. Memory. A man in a hood. Robed. Familiar. He stood in the center of this very chamber, kneeling on the same platform, his hands raised as the serpent helm descended toward him. You are the vessel. The one who remembers. You were never meant to leave. The image flickered, then fractured, shattering into a million shards that scattered across the walls and reformed into something else. A map. Etched in light across the ceiling, pulsating, fluid. Darek recognized the landmarks instantly. The serpent's spine. The vault of teeth. The ravine of ash. All places he had found through ruins and fragments. But here they were, connected in full. It's not a compass, he breathed. It's a network. Layla turned to him. A network of what? Darek pointed to the final point on the map, the end of the line. A single, red-marked tomb surrounded by warning symbols and ancient glyphs of silence, death, and memory severed. A prison, he said. Buried not to hold something in, but to hold a truth down so deep that even time would forget it. Rafi stepped back. And we're digging it up. Darek nodded. And someone else is close to doing the same. As the map faded, one of the obsidian eyes near the far wall cracked open, not shattered, but opened, like a lid that had been sealed for centuries. Inside, behind layers of crystal and protective resin, lay something glinting red and gold. Darek pried it free. A medallion. Etched with concentric serpent coils and a single ruby eye at the center. On the back, 3 words carved in ancient script. Do not remember. As his fingers brushed the ruby, another flash struck him, more intense than the first. Not an image. A feeling. Loneliness. Betrayal. A city buried by sand on purpose. A group of priests kneeling in blood as something inside a masked tomb opened its eyes, and remembered its name. Darek stumbled back, nearly dropping the medallion. What did you see? Layla asked, her voice low. I didn't, he replied, shaking his head. I felt what they were trying to forget. The platform rippled. At the far end, a seam opened in the stone, less a doorway, more like a scar reopening. The chamber beyond was dark. But the air pouring from it carried a scent Darek knew too well. Old tomb air. Mixed with something, wet. And below that? The distant sound of chanting. Not loud. Not close. But coming from beneath the earth. Rafi whispered, someone's already started the ritual. Darek pocketed the medallion. Then we're not just explorers anymore. He drew a blade from his belt, eyes narrowed. We're trespassers in a memory that's waking up angry. Chapter 7, The City Beneath the Compass. The passage that opened beyond the Shrine of Eyes sloped downward at a gradual but steady angle, its floor lined with overlapping copper plates etched with forgotten glyphs. The air was dense, filled with the scent of burned resin and mineral dust. Every step Darek Amun took felt like crossing a boundary, between the world above and a past no one was meant to relive. They were going underground, yes, but not into a cave, or even a vault. Into a city. Or what remained of one. The tunnel emptied into a cavern so vast it swallowed their lantern light. The three of them stood at the edge of an overlook carved into the rock, gazing down upon a subterranean expanse of toppled columns, shattered walkways, and structures built in concentric circles, each level descending deeper into the earth, like a spiral scar carved into the world. It looked ancient. It looked forgotten. But not abandoned. Faint blue flames flickered from hollow sconces. And somewhere far below, voices chanted, low, rhythmic, and steady. Layla stared in awe. This was never a tomb. It's a buried city. Built to contain something, Darek said grimly. Not just to hide it. To watch it. He pointed to the enormous central structure at the lowest tier, a temple-like edifice shaped like a serpent coiled around a massive black obelisk. Its eye, an enormous gem or lens, faced skyward, or what would have been the sky, had the city not been buried beneath the world. The Compass of Wadjet hadn't been leading them to a single relic. It had been guiding them through the memory of a civilization lost to fear. They moved fast but careful, navigating crumbled stairwells and causeways marked with old signs and warning symbols. Darek recognized a few, a glyph for silence, one for blindness, and one for shadows that remember. The deeper they went, the more intact the buildings became. Preserved by salt air and ancient engineering, they passed through narrow streets lined with sandstone dwellings, collapsed altars, and strange devices made of bronze tubing and mirror panels, tools of observation? Scribe's gear? Something else? Rafi paused at one. This was a surveillance city. A prison city. They didn't build this to worship, Layla said. They built it to watch whatever's inside that temple. Derek's gaze never left the serpent obelisk in the distance. Or to stop it from watching back. At the entrance to the third tier, they found fresh signs, footprints, recently disturbed dust, a torn length of crimson cloth caught on a hook. The Brotherhood was ahead of them. A collapsed bridge forced the trio to take a longer path, through a flooded quarter of the city, ankle-deep in murky water. As they passed beneath the stone archways, strange carvings began to appear, human figures with no faces, reaching upward toward stars made of knives. Some were missing their hands. Others held serpent masks. One carving showed a man removing his own eyes and placing them into the compass. Layla looked away. They didn't worship Wadjet. They feared her. They remembered something the surface world chose to forget, Darek said. He paused in front of a shrine where the wall was blackened, burned, not by fire, but by touch. At its center was a handprint. Human. Etched into stone. Fingers splayed wide. Someone opened it before, Darek muttered. At last, they reached the circular perimeter of the temple structure. The obelisk in the center shimmered with veins of gold and obsidian, the serpent coils wrapped so tightly around it that they seemed to pulse with every chant echoing from within. The voices were louder now. Close. Dozens. Maybe more. Someone's activating something, Layla whispered. Darek scanned the walls. No symbols of protection. No markings of containment. Rafi frowned. So, no defense systems? No, Darek said. Only warnings. And we've already passed them all. As they approached the entrance, a faint gust of air swept outward, like the city exhaling. The doors, formed of overlapping bronze scales, creaked open on their own. Darek turned to the others. Whatever's behind those doors, this is what the compass was created for. They nodded. And stepped through. Chapter 8, The Serpent's Eye Opens. The bronze-scaled doors groaned open like the throat of a beast waking from a 1,000-year slumber. Beyond them, a corridor stretched into total darkness, wide, ribbed with curved stone arches, and faintly warm, as if the breath of something enormous still lingered in the air. Darek Amun held the lantern forward, but even its steady flame seemed swallowed by the black. The walls absorbed the light instead of reflecting it, pulsing faintly with the same green-veined glow they'd seen before, but now it was different. Alive. Reactive. Watching. Behind him, Layla tightened her grip on her satchel. Rafi clutched a copper-handled blade they'd pulled from the shrine above. No one spoke. Their voices didn't belong here. As they stepped through, the doors sealed shut behind them with a deep, final clang. Of course, Rafi muttered. Because leaving should never be an option. The floor beneath them was perfectly smooth, covered in a seamless mosaic of serpents coiling inward, all slithering toward a central eye. It wasn't carved. It was fused, metal and stone somehow grown together, impossible to replicate with tools from any known age. Layla whispered, "These aren't just symbols. They're channels." Darek nodded. For memory. He pressed his palm against the wall. A spark ran along the grooves, flaring to life a series of ghostly projections. Not visions. Not stories. Memories, ripped from those who had entered before. A man screaming as the serpent helm descended over his face. A Brotherhood scribe standing in this very corridor, bleeding from the eyes. A whisper, "We took her name. We buried her mind. But she remembers." And in every memory, one image repeated, a serpent's eye, cracked, wounded, and slowly opening. The corridor opened into a massive circular chamber with a domed ceiling high above. The architecture defied logic. The space shouldn't have fit within the structure they'd seen from outside. But it did. The proportions were wrong. The walls bent the eye. Gravity felt tilted. At the center of the room stood the obelisk, not a pillar, but a lens, fashioned of polished black stone veined with gold. It hovered a meter above the ground, suspended by unseen force, rotating slowly in place. Beneath it, a ritual circle. Ancient. Fractured. Reactivated. Figures in crimson robes stood in a ring, 12 of them, chanting in unison, their hoods pulled low. The air vibrated with every word. At their feet, 7 bodies lay motionless, sacrifices, or offerings, Darek couldn't yet tell. And at the far end of the chamber, raised on a dais of mirrored obsidian, stood a 13th figure. He wore the serpent mask. Not ceremonial. Not stylized. Authentic. Coiled bronze shaped with impossible precision. Fangs of inlaid ivory. Eyes of deep green crystal that shimmered with light from nowhere. And though the man stood still, Darek felt the weight of that gaze settle on him like an ancient curse. Layla gasped. "That's not a priest." "No," Darek said. "It's the keeper." The chant halted. The hooded figures turned in unison. The keeper did not. One of the Brotherhood priests stepped forward, voice like wind dragged over stone. "You followed the bloodline. The compass responded to you." "Why?" Darek stepped forward, slowly drawing the medallion from his pocket. "Because you've been digging for centuries, but the compass doesn't open for thieves." He held up the pendant. "It opens for memory." The keeper moved at last. Not walked, floated. His robe barely touched the ground as he descended from the dais, serpent mask glinting in the unnatural light. "The Lotus bearer," he said. The voice was modulated, not from within the mask, but from beneath it. It echoed in their minds. You are his son. The builder's line still lingers. Derek's eyes narrowed. You knew my father? I knew the oath he broke. With a flick of the keeper's hand, one of the dead bodies stirred, convulsing, then rising with inhuman grace. The man's eyes were glassy, his lips torn from chanting too long. He didn't speak. He simply turned toward Darek. The keeper's voice deepened. Your father tried to seal the eye. To erase her name. But memory does not obey death. Layla gripped Derek's arm. Who is she? The keeper turned slowly, his mask locking onto the obelisk above. Wadjet, he whispered. Not a goddess. A gate. The obelisk's rotation increased. The mirrored surface of the chamber flickered with new symbols, circles within circles, spirals tightening. The inner ring of the chamber cracked open, revealing a void beneath the floor, pulsing with the same green veins, and something else. A heartbeat. Rafi stepped back. That's not stone. That's flesh. The chamber began to tremble. The sacrifice circle burned with sudden light. And from within the cracks below, a massive eye began to open, lit from within by a sickly emerald glow, its pupil a jagged slit of golden flame. The keeper turned to Darek. Her memory is almost whole. She was never meant to wake, Darek hissed. She already has. The chanting resumed. The walls of the chamber began to peel, the structure unraveling itself in geometric patterns, revealing more veins, more light, more eyes watching from within the stone. Layla cried out. If that eye opens fully, we lose everything, Darek finished. He looked at the medallion. Then at the compass. Then at the faces of the fallen. Then he whispered, we seal her the way my father couldn't. And sprinted straight into the circle. Chapter 9, The Keeper's Mask. The circle blazed around Darek Amun as he sprinted into its center, light flaring in arcs of emerald and gold. It wasn't just energy, it was memory made visible. Every step through it was like running through someone else's life, flashes of cities turned to sand, priests screaming into blindfolded tombs, and a serpent's gaze swallowing time itself. He hit the dais at full momentum, sliding to a stop just beneath the floating obelisk, the compass core spinning faster above him now, vibrating like a heart out of rhythm. Behind him, the 12-robed Brotherhood priests recoiled, their chant faltering, confused by his sudden breach of the ritual. But the keeper didn't move. He waited. Darek reached for the bronze medallion hanging from his neck. The ruby at its center had gone white-hot, burning against his skin through the fabric of his robes. He pulled it free, heart hammering. The keeper finally spoke. You cannot seal what has already begun to remember. Darek raised the medallion. Then I'll make it forget again. With a burst of instinct more than logic, Darek drove the medallion forward, not at the obelisk, but at the keeper himself. The instant the medallion crossed the inner boundary of the dais, the serpent mask reacted. Its green crystal eyes flared with light. A thin scream, metallic, layered, inhuman, pierced the chamber. The keeper staggered, one gloved hand rising as if to ward it off. Do not invoke the Lotus, he hissed, not here. But it was too late. The medallion responded to Darek's blood, to his legacy. A ring of symbols burst to life in the air around them, wrapping the two men in a sphere of memory, mirrored scenes playing out in slow motion, Darek's father standing before this very obelisk, placing a sealing stone, the moment the Brotherhood shattered it, and a name burned from every scroll it had once adorned. Wadjet. Not a goddess. A sentience older than temples. Older than Egypt. Buried in a prison built of remembrance. The keeper shrieked and reached up, clawing at the serpent mask as cracks began to form across it. A sound like shattering glass and cracking bone filled the air. No, he howled. You don't know what you're The mask exploded outward. Shards flew. And beneath it, Darek saw a face. Or what used to be one. Where the keeper's eyes should have been were two deep hollows, carved and burned, with thread-like tendrils of black light pulsing inside. His skin had taken on the pallor of stone, inscribed with thin lines of glyphs that shimmered and shifted even as they looked at them. He had given his sight to the compass. Not for vision. For memory. The keeper stumbled, clawing blindly at the air. Darek held the medallion aloft. "I don't need to fight you," he said, his voice cutting through the storm of noise and flickering memory. "I just need to finish what my father started." The floating obelisk trembled. Above them, the enormous serpent lens opened wide, revealing its true function, not a beacon, but a mind. A neural prism. It absorbed memory. And it was nearly full. The only way to stop it was to overload it with something it couldn't absorb. Oblivion. Darek dropped the medallion into the groove at the center of the dais. A shockwave blasted outward. The stone cracked. The floor fractured. The compass screamed. Not sound. Information. Memories came flooding out, too fast to parse, too intense to bear. The first priest to kneel at its altar. The blood pact made in desperation to preserve a dying empire. The ritual that tore Wadjet's awareness from flesh and trapped it in crystal thought. The betrayal of those who remembered her too well. Layla, standing at the edge of the chamber, screamed as a wall of memory hit her. Rafi dragged her back, shielding her with his own body. The Brotherhood fell to their knees. Some wept. Some clawed at their hoods. A few fled into the darkness, mad with visions. And the keeper collapsed. The medallion glowed white-hot now, its ruby eye liquefying in the center. Darek stepped back as the lens above cracked straight down the middle. The obelisk fractured, its serpent casing unraveling like a peeled husk. And beneath it, a single, floating seed of light. Not divine. Not evil. Just, sentient. Fractured thought. Pure, ancient remembrance without a body. It hovered there, pulsing. Waiting. Darek reached into his coat and removed the second object his father had left him, not the lotus pendant. But a second medallion, darker, dormant until now. The forgetter's seal. He placed it into the socket beside the first. Both lit as one. The chamber exploded with silence. The light vanished. The seed flickered once, and was gone. The Compass of Wadjet shut itself down, slowly folding inward, the obelisk collapsing back into inert black stone. And the watchers, the eyes, the walls, the pulse beneath the floor, all stilled. The ritual was broken. The Brotherhood was scattered. Darek knelt beside the shattered dais, exhausted, the medallions now fused into one. Layla and Rafi approached slowly. "What happened?" she asked, voice trembling. "I gave her back what she wanted," Darek said. Silence. Rafi looked around. "Is it over?" Darek shook his head. "We didn't destroy her. We buried her again." He stood, breathing deep. "Now we have to make sure no one ever finds this place again." And behind them, unnoticed by all, one of the serpent eye carvings blinked. Chapter 10, Dust Cannot Bury Fire. Silence hung thick in the aftermath like a fog that refused to lift. The chamber that once pulsed with ritual light and whispered memory now stood dead. Cold. Hollow. But not empty. Darek Amun crouched beside the fused medallion at the center of the broken dais, its glow finally gone. The compass's core was inert, no hum, no warmth, no reaction. Still, he didn't touch it. Not yet. Not until he was sure. Behind him, Layla leaned against a fractured pillar, her face pale and slick with sweat. Her voice was hoarse. I can still hear her. Darek didn't need to ask who. So can I, he said quietly. Rafi sat near the door, cradling a twisted arm and muttering curses through clenched teeth. One of the Brotherhood's final chants had sent a shockwave through the chamber as it collapsed, slamming him against the stone. Not fatal, but close enough to scare them all. We should go, Rafi said, wincing. Before something else in this hellhole wakes up. Layla nodded, eyes still distant. It's not over. You feel that, don't you? Darek did. He could feel it under his skin. Something had changed. As they retraced their path through the temple's inner corridors, Darek noticed at first, small, imperceptible shifts in the architecture. The walls had moved. Not by force, but by design. Stairwells that led up now curved sideways. Passageways looped where they hadn't before. And behind every reflection in the mirror-black stone, there was a flicker. A half-second delay. A hint of wrongness. Layla stopped walking. Did the city just shift again? Yeah, Rafi said. And not in a cute, Escher way. Darek knelt and pressed his palm against a newly formed wall. Heat. Subtle. Familiar. She didn't die, he said slowly. She retreated. Into the walls? Layla asked. No. Into the structure. She's part of it now. Whatever that seed of thought was, it didn't vanish. It just moved deeper. He stood, eyes narrowing. The compass didn't contain her. It distributed her. A faint grinding echoed above them, like great gears turning beneath layers of earth. They finally found a staircase that hadn't been there on their way in, one that led not up, but out. A narrow ascent cut through the cliffside, angled with strange precision, as though it had only just been carved into place. The architecture here was different, smoother, less ancient. There were no glyphs, no eye carvings. No sign of the Brotherhood. Just cold stone and the smell of old blood. What is this place? Layla whispered. Darek studied the walls. Not part of the original city. He pointed to the stone joints, newer. Cleaner. This was built after. Someone tried to build a way out from within. They emerged into a side chamber, bare, circular, with a single shaft of sunlight piercing from above. And there, in the center, was a body. Kneeling. Perfectly preserved. Still clutching a tool in one hand, a masonry chisel, frozen mid-action. Layla gasped. Who is that? Rafi leaned in. It's not a statue. Darek moved closer, gently turning the chisel in the corpse's stiff hand. Carved into the handle, nearly worn smooth by time. Ammonius. He dropped it. My father. They buried him there, without words. Darek sat in the sand afterward, beneath the shaft of light, holding the fused medallion. He finally understood. His father hadn't run. He hadn't vanished. He had returned to the compass, alone, and sealed the last pathway with his own hands. He tried to keep it buried, Darek whispered. He knew even sealing the eye wasn't enough. He built this escape route so that one day, someone else, me, would know where not to go. Layla sat beside him. You finished what he started. Darek shook his head. No. I reopened it. Rafi approached. So what now? Darek stood slowly, eyes tracing the spiral staircase curling up towards sunlight. We make sure no one ever comes back. Hours later, as night fell across the dunes of Perbastet, 3 figures emerged from a hidden crevice in the mountains. Exhausted. Changed. Darek watched as the final rays of sun dipped behind the horizon. In his hand, he still held the compass medallion, its glow finally gone. He turned to Layla and Rafi. We bury the coordinates. We erase the path. We scatter the maps. And if anyone asks about the Compass of Wadjet, Rafi raised a brow. We tell them it was a myth? No, Darek looked at the stars, his voice quiet. We tell them it was remembered wrong. And far beneath their feet, deep in the city where the Serpent once slept, a single eye blinked open. Just once. Then closed. Waiting.
Every story has an ending, but some mysteries live on. If you enjoyed this tale, don't let it fade into the shadows. Smash that like button and subscribe for more thrilling stories that will transport you beyond the veil of the ordinary. Subscribe to our channel and your name will appear at the beginning of our next video, where we will pleasantly thank you for your subscribing. Tap the bell icon so you never miss a journey into the unknown. Share your thoughts in the comments. What twists did you see coming? And what secrets do you think still remain? Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and let the next story begin.